Hollywood likes to pretend it invented the grand space battle, the eerie alien encounter, and the futuristic disaster epic. But the truth is, decades before America cashed in on cosmic terror and high-tech spectacle, Japanese filmmakers were already laying the groundwork. These weren't just strange pulp stories in odd costumes. They were bold experiments that cracked open new ways to imagine the future. And the most surprising part, many of Hollywood's so-called original ideas were already on screen in Japan years earlier. These films were visionary, bizarre, sometimes campy, but always ahead of their time. From star-shaped aliens trying to save humanity, to insects turning into intelligent swarms, to jellyfish monsters that consume carbon itself. Japanese cinema planted seeds Hollywood would later harvest. What you're about to see isn't just a list of forgotten oddities. It's the hidden blueprint of modern science fiction. Warning from Space, 1956. The first Japanese color sci-fi wasn't about giant monsters destroying cities. Instead, it dared to show aliens shaped like starfish. Warning from Space, directed by Koji Shima, dropped audiences into a surreal vision where strange visitors arrive not to conquer Earth, but to warn it. These beings, called the Pyrans, announce that a rogue celestial body is on a collision course with Earth. They're not villains, they're messengers, but their bizarre appearance, with glowing eyes and limbs like sea creatures, makes humanity laugh them off. Only when disaster looms does the world realize the warning was deadly serious. Think about it. This was released just a decade after Hiroshima, when Japan still lived under the shadow of annihilation. That cultural trauma gave the movie's premise extra weight. It wasn't just entertainment. It was an echo of survival anxiety. The visuals look strange today, almost campy, but beneath the surface lies a serious question. Can humanity learn to listen before it's too late? Hollywood would eventually recycle the same blueprint in Contact, Arrival, and Independence Day, but Japan told it first in bold colors and unforgettable starfish suits. The Mysterians, 1957. 1 year later, Ishiro Honda, the creative mind behind Godzilla, shifted his focus from giant monsters to alien conquerors. But his aliens weren't lumbering beasts. They were cerebral, political, and disturbingly familiar. In The Mysterians, a massive dome rises from the earth, housing a group of helmeted invaders who claim they only want a small piece of land and peaceful coexistence. But it's a lie. Soon their dazzling weapons and towering machines reveal their real agenda: domination. What makes this film so interesting isn't just its spectacle of ray guns and miniature cities reduced to rubble, it's the political subtext. Released during the Cold War, the Mysterians symbolized foreign powers demanding treaties and territory while disguising their intentions as diplomacy. It was a chilling metaphor that hit far too close to home for audiences of the time. Visually, it was groundbreaking. The aliens' insect-like helmets, the futuristic dome, and the sheer scale of destruction left audiences stunned. And here's the kicker: the tropes introduced in The Mysterians didn't fade. You can trace them straight into Star Wars' Galactic Senate or Hollywood's obsession with alien empires demanding Earth's compliance. Honda wasn't just entertaining, he was showing how peace can be a mask for control, a message that would echo across decades of cinema. Battle in Outer Space, 1959. Before Star Wars blasted into theaters, Japan was already staging epic space battles. Honda returned in 1959 with Battle in Outer Space, a direct sequel to The Mysterians. But this time, the story lifted off Earth entirely. The villainous natal aliens strike first, disabling satellites and pulling tanks into the sky with gravity beams. Earth's response? Global unity. Nations come together to send astronauts aboard sleek rocket ships to confront the invaders in space itself. Special effects wizard Eiji Tsuburaya, later hailed as the godfather of Japanese effects, delivered jaw-dropping miniature models of rockets, cities, and alien weapons. Audiences in 1959 had never seen such detailed depictions of space warfare. It felt like a peek into the future. But beneath the spectacle was something bigger. The Cold War was raging, and the idea of global cooperation instead of competition was radical. In an era of division, the movie imagined humanity united against a greater threat. Hollywood took this exact premise and refined it. Independence Day owes its global counterattack to battle in outer space. Even Armageddon echoes the idea of nations setting aside rivalries to face cosmic disaster. Honda showed it first. Sometimes vision matters more than Polish. The Human Vapor, 1960. Not all Japanese sci-fi relied on giant battles. Some turned inward, exploring the dangers of science gone wrong. In 1960, Honda directed The Human Vapor, a haunting story that feels closer to Frankenstein than Godzilla. It follows Mizuno, a mild-mannered man subjected to a dangerous experiment. The result? He can dissolve into vapor, slipping through walls, vanishing at will. But instead of becoming a hero, Mizuno spirals into obsession. He uses his power to rob banks, funding the career of a dancer he idolizes. His love is unrequited, and his desperation consumes him. What makes the film unforgettable isn't just the eerie effects, smoke machines, double exposure, and clever editing that made his vaporous transformation convincing. It's the tragedy. Mizuno isn't pure evil. He's human, desperate, misguided. That moral gray area was rare in genre films of the time. Hollywood later embraced this complexity with sympathetic villains and tragic anti-heroes, but Honda was already exploring it. The Human Vapor whispered where other sci-fi films roared, proving sometimes the quietest stories leave the deepest scars. Dagora, 1964. Now imagine this. A monster shaped like a floating jellyfish, gliding silently across the sky, feeding on carbon itself. That's Dagora, a film that sounds absurd until you realize how deeply metaphorical it really is. Instead of smashing buildings, Dagora simply drifts, absorbing coal, diamonds, and anything carbon-based. It's not angry, it's hungry. And in 1964, during Japan's rapid industrial growth, the symbolism was hard to miss. Dagora was a living metaphor for unchecked consumption. Visually, it was stunning. The creature floated with a hypnotic grace, dissolving targets with eerie calm. Unlike Godzilla, there was no roar, no stomping. It was inevitable, unstoppable. Hollywood took note. From the Blob to the Mist, the idea of amorphous, unstoppable threats traces back to Dagora. Even Ghostbusters' spectral entities echo its strange, floating menace. Adding to the intrigue was a subplot with jewel thieves caught in Dagora's path. Their greed mirrored the monster's endless appetite, making the story both cosmic and human. Critics didn't know what to make of it, but over time, Dagora became a cult classic, proof that sometimes the scariest monsters don't rage, they consume. Genocide, 1968. If Dagora warned about greed, Genocide screamed about destruction. Known also as War of the Insects, this 1968 film took a premise that still unsettles viewers today. What if the smallest creatures turned against us? Set against Cold War paranoia, it begins with a U.S. military plane crashing on a remote island, carrying a deadly secret cargo. Soon, swarms of insects begin attacking humans in terrifying unison. At first, it looks like a natural disaster, but then comes the chilling revelation: something, or someone, may be controlling them. The imagery was unforgettable. Close-ups of crawling ants and beetles, soldiers overwhelmed by clouds of buzzing creatures. It was suffocating, claustrophobic horror. Unlike kaiju films where one giant beast is the threat, Genocide made countless tiny foes just as terrifying. Beneath the surface, it was bleak. Humanity's own violence and paranoia mirrored the insects' attacks. The message was sharp. Maybe the planet itself was fighting back. Hollywood's later eco-horror from Phase 4 to arachnophobia owes a debt to this film. It was too grim for mainstream audiences at the time, but looking back, it feels prophetic. A warning about nature's quiet revenge. Latitude Zero, 1969. Of course, Japanese sci-fi wasn't always bleak. Sometimes it was pure pulp adventure. Latitude Zero, directed by Honda in 1969, was exactly that. A proto-superhero spectacle decades before Marvel dominated theaters. At its heart was the Alpha, a golden submarine captained by the heroic Craig Mackenzie. His mission? To stop a mad scientist who creates mutant creatures and plots global chaos. From the start, the film feels like a Saturday morning cartoon brought to life. Bright costumes, flamboyant villains, imaginative gadgets. It embraced fun without apology. What makes it stand out is its international flavor. A Japanese-American co-production, it starred Hollywood legends Joseph Cotten and Cesar Romero alongside Japanese actors. This cross-cultural blend gave it a unique energy, almost predicting how global blockbusters would later be marketed. Latitude Zero wasn't afraid to be bizarre. Mutant bats, brainwashing experiments, volcanic layers. It swung for the fences every time. Hollywood later adopted the same formula: eccentric villains, high-tech bases, team-driven adventures. In many ways, Latitude Zero walked so Marvel could run. The Manster, 1959. Sometimes the strangest images are the ones that last forever. The Manster, a Japanese-American co-production released in 1959, delivered exactly that. It tells the story of Larry Stanford, an American journalist in Tokyo who becomes the subject of a grotesque experiment. The result? A second head begins to sprout from his shoulder. Audiences in the late 50s had never seen anything like it. The transformation scenes, skin bubbling, bones cracking, flesh twisting, were nightmare fuel. The tagline said it all: two heads terror, twice the fear. But it wasn't just cheap shock. The film tapped into deeper fears about identity and duality. Larry, once a confident professional, spirals as his mutation grows. By the end, he's no longer one man, but two entities battling for control. That theme, that the real horror lies in losing your humanity, would echo in films like The Fly and even Venom. The Manster planted the seed, bridging East and West with a hybrid horror sci-fi style. Critics may have brushed it off, but it became a cult classic. Proof that sometimes the most bizarre experiments create the most lasting nightmares. Gamera vs. Guiron, 1969. If the Manster was grotesque, Gamera vs. Guiron was gleefully absurd. Part of the Gamera series, this 1969 entry leaned into the idea of Gamera as the friend of children, and then took it to bizarre new extremes. The story? Two boys stumble onto a spaceship and get whisked away to a distant planet. There, they meet Guiron, a reptilian monster with a colossal blade for a head. His signature move? Slicing enemies into pieces with terrifying precision. The design was so outrageous it bordered on cartoonish, but that only made it memorable. Gamera, of course, arrives to battle Guiron in sequences that are brutal, wild, and oddly hilarious. What makes the film important isn't just its kaiju chaos, but its unapologetic weirdness. Alien women scheming, children outsmarting adults, monster wrestling matches. It embraced camp long before Hollywood did. Over time, fans came to love it for its so bad it's good energy, and you can see its influence in modern blockbusters that blend humor with spectacle, like Guardians of the Galaxy. Gamera vs. Guiron might not have been polished, but it had personality, and that's what kept it alive. Time of the Apes, 1974. While Hollywood's Planet of the Apes dominated theaters, Japan created its own surreal spin. Time of the Apes, stitched together from a Japanese TV series in 1974, dropped scientists and children into a future where apes ruled civilization. The setup was pulp perfection. A cryogenic accident leaves humans waking in a world where intelligent apes view them as dangerous relics. Sound familiar? Absolutely. But Japan added its own flavor: futuristic sets, dreamlike pacing, and a strange, hypnotic tone. The ape costumes may not have matched Hollywood's prosthetics, but they carried a certain charm. The story asked the same big questions. What happens when humans lose their place at the top? What defines civilization when roles are reversed? Western audiences mostly encountered it years later through Mystery Science Theater 3000, which mocked its dubbing and clumsy edits. But beneath the camp lies a sincere, ambitious experiment. A reminder that Japanese sci-fi was never afraid to tackle bold visions, even if the execution was messy. Message from Space, 1978. When Star Wars became the global phenomenon of 1977, Japan fired back with one of its boldest productions, Message from Space. The premise was mythic. A dying planet sends glowing seeds into the galaxy searching for heroes. Those seeds gather a ragtag group of rebels, warriors, and misfits who must rise against a ruthless empire. Sound familiar? Of course. But this wasn't just a copy, it was a remix, filtered through Japanese creativity. Director Kinji Fukasaku delivered a film dripping with color and comic book energy, flamboyant costumes, wild set designs, and space battles bursting with intensity. It didn't have the sleek polish of George Lucas's effects, but it had something just as powerful: fearless imagination. Critics sneered at the time, calling it a knockoff. But over the years, Message from Space earned cult respect. Hollywood eventually embraced the same mix of samurai honor and galactic rebellion. Even George Lucas admitted his debt to Japanese cinema. In a way, Message from Space was Japan reclaiming its influence, reshaping Star Wars for its own audience. Sayonara Jupiter, 1984. As the Star Wars craze cooled, Japan looked beyond space battles and imagined the ultimate cosmic disaster. Sayonara Jupiter, released in 1984, was a big-budget attempt to blend hard science with sweeping spectacle. The story follows Dr. Honda, an engineer tasked with harnessing energy near Jupiter. But a new threat emerges: a black hole racing toward the solar system. The only hope: using Jupiter's gravity to alter its path. This wasn't just popcorn spectacle, it was philosophical. Characters debated humanity's survival, colonization, and whether technology could save or doom us. In the 1980s, these were bold questions, echoing fears of overpopulation and ecological collapse. Visually, it was ambitious: starfields, space stations, cosmic scale. Critics were divided, but the film dared to aim higher. Decades later, its DNA is visible in Armageddon, Deep Impact, and even Interstellar. Sayonara Jupiter may not have conquered the box office, but it showed Japanese sci-fi was never afraid to ask enormous questions about humanity's place in the cosmos. From starfish-shaped aliens to blade-headed monsters, from insects rising in swarms to black holes threatening the solar system, Japan's forgotten sci-fi wasn't just strange entertainment. It was prophecy. These films explored paranoia, greed, obsession, unity, and survival, long before Hollywood dressed the same ideas in billion-dollar effects. The truth is, Hollywood never stopped listening. Beneath every cosmic dogfight, every alien warning, every apocalyptic vision, you'll find echoes of Japanese imagination. So now the question is, out of all these forgotten gems, which one surprised you the most?